Thank you for being here today. My name is Bill Kenny, and you're on a webinar entitled The Millennial Paradox, Navigate the Chaos and Create New Communicators. Well, that's hard to say. Anyway, well, the whole idea here today is to talk about what's changed and ways to overcome it, whether we're teaching millennials, whether millennials are working for us, whether we're in teams of individuals that include millennials that are working on certain projects or whatnot. And there are really a variety of perspectives here on the call today. But the real goal is to sort of unravel the dynamics that are going on right now in really in our communities, in the world, that are changing how millennials and the generations that follow them are communicating. And it's really not up necessarily for them to adapt, but how do we adapt to that? How do we learn from this and find new ways to engage and to be able to communicate? So thank you all for joining us. This hopefully you'll find very interesting and compelling, and we'll open the lines back up at the end for any additional questions. So just to kind of kick things off a little bit, a quote from Jerry Seinfeld, which I love about communication. So according to most studies, people's number one fear is public speaking. Number two is death. This means that most of us would rather be in the casket than doing the eulogy. A little bit ironic, but I think Seinfeld's delivery was probably better. So here's where we're going today. First, just a little bit about me, so you know my background. I'm the founder of Test My Pitch. I go to somewhere over 100, maybe 150 pitch events per year, so I get to see lots and lots of communication, both in the entrepreneurship space and the education space, and even in the corporate or enterprise space. And there's certainly lots of unique things going on. One disclaimer about this topic in particular, the challenge of sort of talking in generalities about a whole group of individuals, such as millennials, is that invariably there'll be some areas where this doesn't apply to everyone in that generation, and no matter what we say, it won't apply to everyone in the generation. So, the goal here is not at all to either indict an individual or a generation. Millennials have an incredible amount going for them. They have incredible strengths. And again, it's really not that they're doing anything wrong necessarily, but that it's really about how do we adjust to this shift and help them in ways that really helps them take advantage of their strengths. And like all of us, they have challenges or weaknesses, and how do we help them either minimize or overcome those challenges? So, our agenda today is to, first I'm going to actually pop up the questions that you all submitted. We will get to these, and there are definitely a big part of our agenda in the second half will be to talk about the questions that you all brought up, and so we'll get back to these as we go. So now the agenda. So we'll talk first about the background of oral communication and really some of the kind of key challenges that have affected us over time. We'll talk about some specific challenges that face millennials that are unique really with that generation and, again, the following generations. And then we'll get to the questions that you've posed. So thank you again, and here we go, hopping right into it. So let's talk about the background, kind of where this all started, and the oral communication, presentations, public speaking has been going on for a long time. It really dates back to the ancient Egyptians, so quite some time, and certainly it's evolved. It went to the next big population that did lots of public speaking were the Greeks, and then of course here the Romans, and then we progressed to Abraham Lincoln and people like Churchill. Incredible orator, really since the beginning of time, since the ancient Greeks, and then all the way up until the Lincoln and Churchill days, and even beyond. there have been sort of thought to be about 4 kind of core challenges that people face when they look to communicate in public. And those really kind of come into a few different ilks. So you've got the performance fear, certainly, to Seinfeld's quote earlier, and then to a quote by Dale Carnegie. Students of public speaking continually ask, how can I overcome self-conscious and the fear that paralyzes me before an audience? And so you think about, that. I mean, this quote is literally 100 years old. It's from Dale Carnegie's book, The Art of Public Speaking. So overcoming that has been a problem, again, long time. And that performance fear, the idea of being sort of judged by others, you're not saying exactly the right thing. Then there's the content challenge, the idea of molding your communication to the audience, making sure that you're audience-centered has been a major challenge. And so Liaro has an interesting saying here, they're not going to remember the words, they're going to remember how you made them feel. Make them feel something. So that idea of connecting with the audience, with taking them on a journey and telling them a story is really important, and content continues to be a challenge. Speaking concisely, the idea of taking out all the jargon and of keeping your words and communication simple so that it connects with the audience and they leave remembering what you said or the key points of what you said. Dorothy Sarnoff, make sure you have finished speaking before your audience has finished listening. Really key. So keeping people engaged and excited about what you're talking about and keeping it concise. And then finally, practice, making sure that you have made it so that your communication is well practiced and it is easily delivered to the audience is really a key. Mark Twain, it usually takes me more than 3 weeks to prepare for a good impromptu speech. Yes, certainly. The idea that the best speakers often look like it's natural and it's easy for them, but it's not. They practice and they found techniques that help them get better. And when we were growing up, we'd speak in front of the mirror, and we would speak in front of friends, or we would speak in our car, or speak in the bathroom, or do whatever. But we'd find ways to begin to build those skills. And so it's that time and practice that allows us to get there. So what's different about and different for millennials? What makes it more challenging or different types of challenges for them? And I'd say that millennials generally have sort of the challenges that we've talked about, but they've got some additional barriers that are really confronting them with regard to communication. Number one is socialization. It's when we think about the barriers to socialization that millennials have, it's pretty significant. From a very young age, they're entertained. They get sort of pacified with all different types of stimulus. So it could be things like, sort of having their own private screen and watching their own movie as they're driving around, as opposed to sort of playing all the games that are outside, sort of the windows, and doing things like the license plate game and the sign game and all those types of things that many of us have done. And so one of the studies that's gone on has found that 60% of prospective employers said that millennial applicants lacked communication and interpersonal skills. And we hear this is borne out as we talk to college deans and different academics when they're doing studies of their potential employers in their career centers and so on. We hear this all the time, that this soft skills, particularly oral communication and teamwork, are lacking considerably. So, we see this all the time, kids out in nature, but yet they're sort of, again, being pacified or entertained by something that is, that's really, it's not real. It's just a, it's just a stimulation of some kind. And so, the idea that we're sort of not taking advantage of nature is leading to this sort of antisocial or social challenge, both in terms of the comfort and confidence. It's sort of, it puts additional barriers to individuals being comfortable and confident in their communication, as well as their ability to socialize with team members as they go, whether it's into college or whether they go into the workplace. And so finding ways to sort of address this and overcome these barriers is certainly the first challenge with millennial communication. So according to Wendy Belwell from the University of Florida, employers have put business schools on notice that collaboration is the norm, and they don't want to hire people who can't talk. And we see examples of this all the time when we go into retail stores or whatnot. The idea that individuals generally have a difficult time with eye contact, with direct acknowledgement, with speaking loud enough. All those types of things, continue to sort of erode and create challenge. So the number two challenge that we found with millennials is the feedback fear. And it's not that millennials don't like feedback. In fact, of all generations, they're probably the most open to feedback. You think about the games that they play, all of these stimulus, they give them a score at the end. In fact, they'll even rank them more often than not against not just themselves, but other competitors, whether it's within a small community or a great community, a large community. So they not only get sort of feedback for their own sort of current performance, but their past performances, for their performances within a group. And so feedback is not something that they're not used to and they don't like. The issue is, what we're finding is that they're really not trained to take feedback and to learn from feedback. And so that seems like a really big opportunity. And some of the things that have created this challenge is that, the idea that everybody gets a trophy, everybody is recognized, or everybody's a winner for participation, this sort of participation trophy challenge. And the idea that, it's interesting that sort of in the gaming world, they're used to being ranked and scored and accepting feedback. But when they go to the athletic world or some of the other competitions that they might enter as students, the idea that somehow there's a ranking and somehow they didn't get recognized is a problem. And where we find the gap is more often than not in that they don't know why. So in other words, there's no sort of validation or qualification of the ranking. So it's without any type of understanding. At least when they play the game, they see their points versus the other person's points, and it's easier. And of course, playing a soccer game or whatever other sport, they would see the points. And so, but the idea that sort of the participation trophies have sort of diluted the value of true feedback. And actually, there's a football player, James Harrison, he plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who has sort of begun to lead a movement in this area, and I know there are other leaders in this regard, but so this quote kind of goes on to two screens, but he says, sometimes your best is not enough, and that should drive you to want to do better. He goes on to say, not to cry, not to whine, until somebody gives you something to shut you up and keep you happy. And obviously, he's very direct. But he has two sons, and he actually, the trophies that were pictured in the previous screen were trophies that he returned to an organizer of an event. His sons had won them or had received them for participation, and they really had nothing to do with performance, but just for showing up. And so, and again, the point isn't necessarily that this is wrong, but that it's another challenge and another thing that we need to think about in terms of how to adjust to it, how to adapt to it in order to make our programs, our companies as strong as they can be, and so that we set millennials up and the generations that follow for the best chance of succeeding. So the third challenge that millennials face, and you know, we all see this every day, and we all participate to some degree, is just the change in communication from sort of the very strong oral communication to moving much more to a text-centered communication, whether that's sort of physical text messages or messaging via the various social medias or emails and all the other forms of texting, Snapchat and so on. And so there are a variety of challenges that creates. One is it can be an incredible distraction. Obviously it's difficult, and many studies have borne this out, that it's impossible, truly impossible to multitask successfully, and yet we're sort of asking people to do this, or allowing people to do this, where they're being distracted in whether it's a classroom or business environment, and ultimately not really being present is definitely a huge challenge. And we see this also in the family environment, where everybody has sort of got their own device and sort of in their own world and not present as well. And what happens from that? There are a lot of outcomes from this, but one is the sort of English challenge that it creates. The idea that sort of spelling and words are becoming less important, and so is this really communication? Should we be concerned about it? Does the receiver understand the message? What does it say about the sender? Does it communicate something about them as well? So there are a variety of communications here and a variety of sort of perspectives, but it's really about sort of how do we deal with the challenge that electronic communication creates. And again, this is new, really a new distraction or a new advent that the millennial generation is really the first to have to deal with in a big way. And again, our goal is really to help them to be as successful as they can be. This gives a sense of sort of the volume of text messages that happen. So at very early ages, you can see there's some calls, and individuals also do some texting, up to 400 a month. But the numbers go up considerably as children get into the teen years, 13 to 17 years old. You're talking about at least 50 texts a day, and really only about a quarter as many phone calls. So the practice they get at text communication is considerably more than the number of phone calls that they do. So what would that be? That would be about a phone call and a little more than a phone call a day. I'm sorry, that's about 10 phone calls a day versus the idea of 50 plus texts a day. So 4 keys to improving millennial communication. And so the goal here is really to take these challenges that we've seen, both with the previous generations and with the millennials and beyond, and to come up with 4 keys to help improve the communication of all of our individuals. So the first one is really around content, and the real key here is to help individuals get better and better at understanding the audience they're speaking to. And what we've seen is that there's a real tendency when people are public speaking to get very inwardly focused. And in general, certainly millennials have this challenge, but I think we've seen this with many generations, is the sort of, and this is as we probably adopt some of this technology, is we're becoming more self-focused when we say go to an event. Maybe we're going to be speaking, or whatnot. We're, on our phone, we're on our email, we're texting, we're doing all these things as opposed to being present. And from a public speaking standpoint, this creates many challenges. Number one is we're not networking and meeting people. We're not learning about the audience. So as we interact, we're going to learn about people. We're going to ask them questions. We're going to find out what their background is, why they're here, what they're hoping to gain. In that conversation, they're also going to learn about us. And so as they hear us actually stand up to speak, they'll actually have some knowledge of us and will likely be more of an advocate than otherwise. And they'll have, in some parts, probably heard our story for a second time. And their ability to engage more, to help us in terms of advocacy or asking questions or whatever the case might be, will certainly be amplified. So the key really here is to help our staff, our students, become better listeners, to become better at finding out about the people who we're going to be addressing. And again, this can happen before the event. It can happen at the event. It's really great if it happens in both cases. But the more we're audience-centered, the more we learn how to listen, the more we learn how to observe. I was just recently at a pitch event where I was actually a judge, and there was air conditioning on, and none of the pitchers were observant of this, and in fact, none of them spoke loud enough that the judges, who were only 20 feet away, could hear what they were saying. I mean, it was really amazing that none of them picked up on that idea, and it was a pitch event where they actually got to pitch twice. It was sort of a practice event, and we let all of them pitch through once. And then we let them know about the air conditioning and the fact that we could only hear a few of the people who spoke. But the idea, it was kind of interesting that, again, they were so inwardly focused that they hadn't adjusted to the environment or the audience in a way that made it so that the audience could hear their message. And it really doesn't matter how much you practice. If you don't overcome those environmental barriers, your word isn't going to resonate. So ultimately, it's about becoming sort of a curious George. How do you find out about the audience, the environment, and all those things? It's really about using all of your resources and faculties, whether it's your power of observation or your ability to ask questions of the organizer or of individuals in the room. But the more that you're, again, outwardly focused, the better your content will align with what the audience wants and needs and what will compel them to action. Next is really about frequent and really about creating a level of frequency of opportunity to pitch or to communicate. And the more we public speak, the better we're going to get at it. So we've learned, certainly in the gaming environment, that the number of activities we do, we certainly see children get better and better quickly. And you think of those games, they're not long games, they're fairly short, and they entertain them, and the children's scores get better, and they get better. And unfortunately, it's like an addictive process. But it's that frequency that allows them to improve their skills to the place where they become better, and that skill improvement is reinforcing, and they find happiness and joy in that. The key is really to find ways to get individuals and team members and students to work together to get those same types of experiences. And this could be virtually working together, or it could be in-person working together. It could be, we all could be in different locations if there's a virtual way to do it, or we could be in the same location. But again, the idea is to give various experiences that give frequent opportunities to practice oral communication. And today, the cool thing is the technology is in such a place where it's very easy to record a video. It's very easy to get feedback on that. The issue is really about how do you make it easy to do? How do you make that sort of process easy? And what we hear from many professors is that quite often there isn't the time in the classroom to do lots, sort of multiple iterations of oral presentations. There may be one round, and maybe it's towards the end of the semester or whatnot. But it's, there are certainly some online opportunities in terms of how to do that, and to allow students to get sort of iterative, repetitive opportunities to frequently practice their oral communication skills. So not everything needs to happen in the classroom. And having a frequent process allows us to think of it much more as training. When you think about getting physically fit, you don't sort of go and exercise one day, and you certainly don't go and exercise one day with all the weight or all the distance that you might do, or at your top speed. You progressively improve, you progressively do more, you progressively get reinforced because you're physically feeling better. And so all of these things come to play, but ultimately you never get to much of a level of fitness without frequency. And so it's very much the same thing with any muscle we're going to activate, and certainly the public speaking muscle is one that definitely demands frequency. So the third idea here is formation, and what we really mean by that is the sort of notion of getting that first draft quickly built, the idea of forming our scripts quickly. And so we actually find that as we do our testing, that the formation is the biggest barrier for people, and they get stuck on start. We find lots and lots of people who say, I want help, I want feedback, but getting them to provide you with a script is the biggest challenge. And that's why we've actually developed all sorts of tools to help people very quickly develop scripts. And the getting stuck on start keeps all the other parts from happening. They won't have frequency. They won't have good content that's aligned with the audience. And so this idea of formation is really key and important. And so going sort of back to that training metaphor, the idea here is in formation, it's first really about technique. We don't care about how much weight or how many repetitions. What we care about is you're not going to hurt your back. You're going to stand in a way with the right posture and in a way that does two things. One is you don't hurt yourself and you sort of learn the technique, but two is so that you come back tomorrow. We want to make sure that you're engaged and that you're excited and interested, and you begin to see a little bit of a hint of progress. And then as we feel more comfortable and our confidence begins to grow, then it's really about how do we get people out of their comfort zone. Formation doesn't really get to a very strong level until people get out of their comfort zone. And as they do that, as they leap to new opportunities, as they stretch themselves, their comfort zone expands, their abilities expand, and their confidence in going in front of large groups or in making important talks to key people expands incredibly. And it's interesting because public speaking is complex. Even pre-millennials, it's complex because it's not just about having a good script. It's about having good delivery and having confidence in your ability to perform or to present that message in a compelling way. And so it's not simple, and you can't just say, I want to be confident, and you're confident. You can't say, I want to be able to communicate this well, and for that to happen. And quite often what we find is that the confidence gets a little better, and then the confidence gets a little better, and because the confidence got a little better, then the confidence gets a little better, and it's this sort of slow, iterative, step, and then next step, and the next step process that allows people to really begin to stretch themselves, and as they get more confident, they are more open to getting outside their comfort zone and taking bigger leaps and finding new success. So the final element that we find is really important in terms of again, improving millennial public speaking skills, as well as the generations that follow and even the previous generations. But it becomes more important thinking about the millennial example in that, again, they're very used to getting feedback. They've gotten it for a long time. They've gotten all this video feedback, tons and tons of it, and they've responded to it. They've gotten better at playing these games because of that feedback. And in fact, in some cases, have gotten addicted to playing those games. So it's really about how do we give them feedback in a way that allows them to process, because we hear all the time in all different types of organizations, from corporations to economic development organizations to schools, that there's a resistance to give feedback, that we can't be honest or direct with the students or our team or our staff because we're afraid of how they'll react. We're afraid that they won't take it well. They've won all these trophies for participation. They're used to getting patted on the back and so on. So what we're really talking about is how do we sort of deliver feedback and create a environment where feedback is just like their experience with the game, that they learn from it, where they can evolve and perform better because of that feedback, as opposed to the situation where they resist it, where they argue it, where they become sort of despondent because of the feedback. That's certainly a whole nother possibility, and we want to avoid that. We want to move into a very productive situation. So what we're going to suggest actually in this is really two key steps. Number one is to train our cohort, our students, our team and staff, how to acknowledge and process feedback. The idea that, that it's really funny that we would want to sort of shelter people from feedback, because when we do that, at some point they're going to go out into the real world. They're going to talk to real customers. They're going to talk to real employees. They're going to talk to real vendors, real partners, real strategic opportunities, and they're going to get feedback, and they won't have at all been prepared for this. And so they're at some point going to get direct and honest feedback. And we quite often find it's when individuals ask for money. That's usually today when the best feedback happens, is when, a sales rep asks for the business, or an employee asks for a raise, or an entrepreneur asks for funding, or whatever the case might be. But when we ask for money, usually we get really, really good feedback. So the idea is, how do we create a situation where we can process feedback? So the first notion here is the realization that all feedback is perfect. And we know this because it's somebody's point of view. And from a training standpoint, when we understand that whatever somebody is telling us is how they see the world, and it's not necessarily how we see the world. It may be, and maybe it should alter how we see the world, and that's fine. But it's really up to us to internalize it and process it. And if we react negatively to it, then we're much less likely to get feedback from that person in the future, or to even understand the context of why they have that point of view. And so it's in training, we want to help our people understand how to find out what's behind that feedback, what's causing the person to have that point of view. What do they see that possibly we don't see? And we should do this whether it's negative feedback or positive feedback. We need to know context. It's really important. And so the first step here is really to help people, help our staff, help our students understand better how to respond to and how to adjust to feedback, so that they can use it effectively. Because the challenge is if you don't know someone's point of view, you can never respond to it. You can never adapt to it. and feedback is just, it's a gift, and the ability to understand someone's point of view does nothing but help us. And again, we can choose to discard it, but isn't it better that we have that choice to discard it than not? It's really ultimately a data point, and if we don't have lots of data, then we generally don't make good decisions. If you think about operating your car, we get lots of data when we operate our car. So the second area here is, the second notion of feedback is really about how to deliver feedback so that it's successful. So we're going to kind of share a couple of thoughts within this. So number one is that feedback should progress from a perspective of being positive and reinforcing to a perspective of being direct and honest. And we generally see that it should do that if we go from a novice or entry level, we want to be positive and reinforcing. And as we have an expectation that somebody is in or moving towards an expert level, our feedback should become more honest and direct. And that will help them adjust their course so that they're most successful. And so in the early stages, when somebody's a novice, what we're really focused on is helping them find their commitment so that they continue to come, so they continue to apply themselves and continue to progress. And as they move up the continuum, we're really focused on improvement. How do we help this person, this team, these individuals become better? And it's not going to happen by still being rah-rah. They won't get that information that allows them to evolve successfully if sort of all we're doing is, cheerleading. In fact, more than likely, they're going to stop coming because it won't be nourishing for them. They won't be growing and evolving, and they'll just sort of opt out, and we see that happen all the time. So if we apply this, we look at sort of three general stages of whether it's within a classroom environment or within a education or staffing environment or whatnot. We're really working through, in general, all of these types of programs are working through three stages. You go from an engagement stage to an education or training stage, and then a performance stage. And so as we do that, we're going to want, early in this, we're going to want to apply this sort of positive, commitment-oriented feedback, so making sure that people are excited and interested, and it's that sort of participation trophy time. And then we want to quickly evolve to more direct and meaningful comments that allow them to evolve. And again, it's not only going to be important for their involvement, but it's going to be important for their continued commitment, because it's very easy for people who, and again, think of the video game sort of example. It's, without understanding how, why we're scoring a certain way, if we don't see that we can improve, we're going to stop playing that game. And so if we want to get people committed, we need to show them pathways to improve performance. So the next here is really, again, to apply the same ideas to the stages in terms of, we want to evolve from focus on form. In other words, how are we lifting the weight, to substance. How much weight are we lifting, or how fast are we running? And the goal here is to quickly evolve from those early stages of focus on form to a place where people are seeing improvement, where they're seeing and gaining substance out of, whether it's training or education that we're providing. So there are a lot of places that feedback can come from. And, we see peer, we see mentor, we see alumni, we see faculty, we see trainers and supervisors, and there are more. So when we look at these, sort of peer feedback can be really interesting. And what we found anyway, is that some of the best learning happens for the person who's actually giving feedback, because they're developing a critical eye. They're able to evaluate and to frame things in a way that is constructive for another individual. And that also helps train them on how to receive feedback. They can begin reading better. They can begin assimilating information in better. They can be curious and want to know more of what's behind comments. So one of the kind of early stage programs we quite often suggest that the focus is on peer review or peer feedback, and then obviously getting engaged the other resources that could be involved, be it sort of mentor, alumni, faculty, trainers, and supervisors, or beyond. But again, the goal would be to use the process to build skills and really build them in a sort of a fully dimensioned way, so a 360-degree type view for each individual. The kind of final thought within feedback is to democratize the results and feedback. So it can be so powerful, and so democratizing results, and what we mean by that is the idea of sharing results broadly. And there are some circumstances where this doesn't work. It may be, institutional or whatnot that it doesn't work. But the point of this is, if you sort of look at, again, sort of the gaming world, it's very normal that the millennials are in a lot of their electronic life see their results in a hierarchy, not just abstractly. And so they see how they do against a group or the sort of the whole community. And the same actually happens if you go into sports, if you go into, say, running as an example. If you run in a 5K road race or a marathon or whatever, within minutes of the end of the event, results of the whole event are available online for the world to review. So how does that help an individual? An individual can use those results in three ways. One, they can look at them to see how they did as their own reference point. What was my time? What was my pace? What were my splits, etc. They can then look to see how they did versus other individuals in the competition, maybe in their age group, maybe in their gender, or maybe overall. And the idea that they can reference specific individuals and maybe even talk to those individuals, find out what those people did to train, what they did to prepare, what they did the day of, what did they eat. Maybe they can even train together. But ultimately, they use those individuals as a reference point for their future development. They can begin modeling that individual performance. And the third way those results are used are that the future participants will use those results to reference as they begin training to participate in that event the next year. And this is a very normal thing that runners or many similar types of athletes do, is when they sort of look to sign up for a specific event, the first thing they do is they look at the results from previous years and figure out what the training would take to perform at a level that they would want to. Now imagine doing that with communication. The idea that whether I'm working in a corporation and I'm applying for a capital expense within my corporation and I have to do a presentation to the board, or I'm a student who's doing an oral presentation in the class. The idea that I could use previous participants as reference points for my own performance, the idea that I could stand on the shoulders of previous participants because I can see, and maybe you redact some information so that it's, there's some confidentiality protected, but the idea that I can use that data as a reference to come in better performed than the previous participants is an incredibly powerful tool. And so, again, the reference points just enhance sort of individual performance, and that's really a big part of the goal here. And again, these are people who are very familiar with feedback. It's just being able to give it to them in a way that they can respond to quickly. So let's talk to your questions. So the first question was, how do we deal with informal communication? And informal communication certainly can be frustrating. The best way that we found is really to ask questions. So if communication isn't clear, whether it's a text or it's oral communication, then it's about sort of asking a question, whether that's in text or orally back, is to say, I'm not exactly sure I know what you mean. Can you explain? And get them to begin building sort of their communication in a way that you get, and reinforcing why you're asking, so that you're getting them to develop those skills, getting them to understand the appropriateness of how they need to speak in the environment that you're in, whether it's a professional environment or a school environment or whatnot. But I don't think we help by just allowing that to happen without sort of asking questions, but using that Socratic approach where we're not necessarily giving them the answer, but asking, getting them to respond, getting their classmates to help out, all those types of things, or getting their peers in a business environment to help out as well. Let's see, how do you best motivate or appeal to millennials? Really three things that we found, and some of the questions here, I'm trying to sort of identify the context, but with an assumption, I'm going to say there are really three. And that number one is to engage them. Two is to let them know they're safe. The thing that's kind of interesting about millennials is, while we've said they're used to being sort of assessed and getting feedback, they're also very sensitive. They have seen examples where people have gotten bullied or shamed on social media, and so being in a safe environment where it's okay to be wrong, it's okay to fail. We see this quite often. We used to have about 30 interns a year, and it was an amazing thing to help them get to a place where they were okay with making decisions. It would usually take a few months to get sort of these young professionals to get to a place where they felt comfortable and confident in making decisions. And we really kind of pushed and pushed and pushed and kind of found ways to kind of get them more quickly excited and interested about making decisions. But first and foremost, it was about trust and feeling safe. And so helping them get to that place where, it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay if you don't win the trophy. That's not really the point of this activity. The point of this activity is to learn. And we're going to make sure you get the information so that when you're done, you'll know exactly what you need to do to win the next time, if you don't win this time. And that's really, really the key. They want to win. They're very motivated to be successful. Let's see, how to help them improve their presentation depth. So, I think the first question here is, are the expectations and evaluation criteria clear? So do they know, when you're finding that individuals aren't deep with their presentation, do they really have a clear sense of what the expectations were and or how they're going to be evaluated? And one of the ways we've overcome this as a platform and as a business is actually we break the communication down into parts. So when students or professionals are developing communication on our platform, they're not necessarily sort of having to deal with creating the communication, the whole communication to begin with. We have them respond to questions, and the assets of that communication are revealed by their responses. And so it's really broken down, just like, sort of eating an elephant is broken down into small bites. And so that it's much easier for them to very quickly form a sort of a more complete presentation or more complete pitch or communication. And that's, more often than not, without this, we find that one of two things happens. Either they get stuck on start, or two, there's glaring gaps in the presentation they make. Either, they over speak about one topic, or they completely leave a whole nother part of the topic sort of out of the presentation. So developing a way for them to easily build the whole presentation very quickly is sort of key. And again, the idea isn't that the first draft is the final draft. It's just a first draft. But until you get the first draft out and you deliver it, you never get to the second draft. So how to separate them from their I thing to being fully engaged? You know, I don't know that there's a simple answer, at least we haven't found it, other than turning it off. And I think it's got to be done in certain environments, be it in meetings, be it in class situations, wherever it is and wherever you find it's a problem, then shut it off. We have a good friend who has a very successful test preparation business. And so he's getting students ready for the SATs and the ACTs and all the different exams. And what he posts is some of his most successful students come from families where the whole family only has one email address and where they don't have social media accounts and whatnot. And, you know, this sounds sort of, I think for most of us, kind of arcane, but he said what it's created for them is a situation where the families, the children, they're all able to respond to each other. They are all much better listeners than the other students that he observes, and they do everything from read more to communicate better, to look people in the eyes, and all those types of things. So there's undoubtedly sort of the right mix, but ultimately each of us only controls sort of certain portions of this. If we have a family, we control what's in the family. If we're supervisors or bosses or educators, we control what happens in those specific environments. But we can ask that those devices be shut off when it's appropriate to be doing something else. And so that would certainly be one option. Let's see, how to increase their public speaking confidence. Really kind of key here, and going to Bruce Lee is always good. So I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. So going back to that notion that we had earlier about practice, about repetition, about exercising the muscle, and making sure that we're training just as we would if we were getting physically fit. We need to exercise the speaking muscle quite often, and certainly with repetition. How can the older generation help them conquer their fears? Yeah. So we have to have a structure for success. We have to kind of take impossible to possible. And so it's a graduated process from having a collegial and easy way for individuals to be wrong, to not be perfect, and to begin graduating them to sort of higher levels of performance and expectation. And it may be by going from some online experience to some in-person experience, whatever sort of fits the environment. But it's a graduated process of getting sort of individuals continually more comfortable and confident with their abilities, and again, making sure that they know that they're in a safe and collegial place. How to improve their critical thinking versus test taking. Huge issue, and we certainly see it all the time. So allow a lot of failure, and you'll meet a lot of success. So it's really, again, creating that collegial and safe environment where it's okay to fail, it's okay to be wrong, and it's about graduating the responsibilities or the expectations so that, again, they see success, it gets reinforced, they feel more comfortable and confident in moving forward, and it's okay to fail. That, and again, we have to limit our risk potential to some degree, but if we don't have risk potential, then we're not going to be learning, and the people around us, be it students or employees, aren't going to be learning either. And the final question, how are groups altering their services as a result? So yes, number one is they are altering their services. And there are really four things or four ways that they're doing it, and it really aligns with exactly what we presented here today, and that is they're focusing on content. They're helping their teams, their students get more audience-centered. They're giving frequent opportunities to develop skills, and that could be the sort of technique and strength, or confidence and competence. And they're helping them get started. They're helping them form those that communication. And finally, they have a model or a process for feedback and the ability for individuals to know how they did and know how they can do better. It's really the ultimate measure of feedback, is when we know how we did and how we can do better. We're certainly more than happy and excited to chat with anybody offline. There are a couple of things you're going to get from us over the next couple of days. We'll share with you a very quick survey, and we'll also share with you a recording of this webinar. So we certainly invite you to watch it again, or ask questions of it, or share it with others, absolutely. And also, to let you know, our next workshop, our next webinar, is going to be on Friday, October 23rd at noon. It's going to be Make Your Pitch Events Kick Butt. And this doesn't necessarily reach, or it's not necessarily important to all of our audience, but there's certainly a portion of our audience that runs pitch events. So the goal here will be to help develop pitch events that are engaging and help enroll and inspire each of our communities. So just so you know a little bit about what we do, we have two tools. One's called Test My Pitch, and the other one's called Score My Pitch. Both actually really can have quite an impact on the topic that we addressed today. Test My Pitch is very akin to if you took the notion of Toastmasters and put it online. So we create private communities where students or professionals or entrepreneurs can develop their communication skills in a collegial environment, and they work within essentially a private community of essentially your community to develop those skills. And then we have Score My Pitch, which is a pitch event judging and feedback system. So it helps sort of capture and aggregate all the wisdom in the room so that the students and or the ventures get the best feedback, and the results, in fact, are the most reliable, so that the results create even another level of strong feedback. Certainly, again, we'll follow up, and certainly we're more than happy to have additional conversations with anyone, and we're very excited to learn more about your programs and to find ways to collaborate. So thank you all so much for participating today, and again, we'll be following up. So enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and hope you're looking forward to a nice weekend. Thanks so much, and bye for now.